Hello, everybody out there in radio land. It is once again that time of the week where we come onto your radio dial and we tell y'all what is really going on here in the city of Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, generally digging underneath the headlines and calling out the establishment on its BS. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo or online at widerfm.org. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So anyway, as always, we've got a lot to talk about on today's show. It has been a crazy weekend in the news cycle. The Israel is apparently trying to start World War III, and we'll talk about that, of course, at length. We've also got some important local stories, especially those local labor stories that we don't want to fall underneath the cracks. And we'll be talking also about some issues related to climate change, as well as the ongoing resistance against ICE. Again, I want to thank y'all for tuning in. One thing I did want to lead with, one of our international stories I was talking about last week, I want to offer a correction. I was talking about the flotilla that was attempted to bring aid to the people of Gaza. You've probably heard about it. It was Greta Thunberg was one of the people who was on it. And I misquoted. I said that all of the participants had been released to their home countries. And it turns out that is actually not true. Um, we still have a couple of individuals who are in Israeli custody. One of them is European parliamentarian Rima Hassan, um, and basically said, as long as the parliament is silent, Europe will no longer be a voice for human rights by the echo of its own complicity and political cowardice. June 8th, as I was kidnapped at sea internationally by an Israeli army while I was on board a humanitarian ship on the way to Gaza. There were 12 of us on board the ship, including 10 European citizens. All have been kidnapped, deported by Israel, and illegally detained for several days. In a deafening silence of this parliament, no condemnation, no call for unconditional release. I was handcuffed, searched naked, handcuffed hands and feet. I was put in solitary confinement for having written Free Palestine in my cell. So just to emphasize and really kind of tweak some of our analysis from last week, yeah, Israel made a big show of letting some of the high profile people go. There was actually an interview where they talked, oh, did Israel offer you a sandwich, Greta? And to Greta Thunberg's credit, she pivoted immediately to, well, yeah, I mean, they can offer whatever kind of PR. They could, yeah, it's like, yes, again, international cameras all around you, somebody with a very large international activist platform, yeah, you're probably going to give them a sandwich rather than give them a very juicy story to tell in the press about how you got locked away in some Israeli prison. So they did keep a couple of the flotilla members, including, as I said, somebody who's part of the European Parliament. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that. Again, it's something that has probably and again this go back to the way the news cycle functions, but it's kind of been overridden, or the wave has crested over with all of this news coming up about the Israel declaring war with Iran. We also had those killings that happened in Minnesota, but I didn't want all of those important details to get lost in the shuffle, and let you know, yeah, that's really the MO. If you have a big enough platform where it's going to cause enough of a international headache, then yeah, they'll let you go and give you a sandwich on your way. If they think they can sufficiently punish you without consummate international condemnation, they'll put you in solitary confinement for calling you out on your status as an apartheid state. So anyway, I want to you can I'll post some information about that. I was reading from Democracy Now just then and their coverage of this story. I'm going to pivot now to something very local, and it has to do with labor rights. We've got another kind of Kalamazoo or Midwest institution that has been engaging in some not so great labor practices. It's reminiscent a lot of the kind of coverage we had about Crow's Nest about same time last year, maybe a little earlier. But this was written by Ruth Thornton. It was published on June 15th. Mass exodus at Kalamazoo Biggby. Ex-employees allege toxic workplace. Nearly all staff at the Biggby Coffee at 4560 West Main Street have quit in solidarity after two coworkers were fired this week, multiple ex-employees said. The dismissals were the final straw in a pattern of abusive language, disregard of employee safety, and management indifference, several former employees allege. More than a dozen employees have either been fired or quit in recent weeks, ex-employees said. The store remains open. Many spoke to the Gazette/MLive, but some declined to share their name on record for fear of retribution. Again, that's a very real thing, especially a lot of these employees, have got a lot of barista credentials. They're probably going to be trying to find a job at one of the other Kalamazoo coffee shops. And standing up to your employer can be a demerit. That is something that can kind of follow you around. And it does. It's one of the things that gives workers hesitancy to speak up and call out unsafe or work conditions or harassment. Talking to 24-year-old assistant manager at the coffee shop, one of the two employees who were fired this week, they started working there 4 or 5 months ago and noticed problematic behavior from management from the start, they said. A month or two ago, a new manager was hired and conditions deteriorated further, they alleged. They and another employee were allegedly fired Tuesday, June 10th. They said they worked a normal, uneventful shift. When they got home, however, the manager called them and accused them of submitting bad reviews of the coffee shop on Google. They thought I had been basically sabotaging their company, they said. The other employee was fired for the same reason, Elliott said. Elliott said they did not write reviews about the store. Elliott also alleges an employee was fired a few weeks ago for refusing to serve a customer food they believed was cross-contaminated with egg, a potential food allergen. That was a number of red flags, Elliott and other employees said. Again, that is, we talk a lot about, big C capitalism and mega corporations on the show, but sometimes these small business owners can be, they can be a king of their own quote unquote castle as far as a tyrannical rule goes. And in this one, it's trying to force your employees to risk the health of your own customers for your own bottom line, which is unfortunately anybody who's worked in food service long enough knows is a woefully common practice. Another ex-employee, 21 years old, was among those to quit in solidarity this week. I was planning on quitting before this situation due to the issues and harassment I was experiencing there. They allege the manager made a sexually inappropriate comment to them in front of their coworkers and boyfriend roughly a week before the firings. Several former employees also allege that management created an uncomfortable work environment. Beyond the hostile work environment, employees also reported safety concerns. A barista who was 22, who was quit in solidarity with their coworkers, said they often had to work alone at night and close up the store. Another former worker, 25, was a shift manager when they were fired a few weeks ago. The store had a consistent problem with underscheduling, they said to MLive. That was at the end of a busy shift when they got fired. Only a younger employee was there with a store full of customers during a truly unmanageable rush, they wrote. Again, this is another thing that we are seeing a lot, not just at Biggby, but really across the spectrum. A lot of y'all work at the bars and restaurants downtown. You know that your bosses are always trying to cut labor costs, which not only puts the workers in precarity, but also increases the chance of mistakes, errors that can be harmful to the customers, and I guess also harmful to the workers' health. When you are by yourself during a rush, these are the things. Like, a lot of y'all may still have those nightmares about being at a rush while working at a restaurant, and you're the only one there. It is difficult, stressful, and again, it's a situation where you need more staffing, but the management will not provide it because they would have to either hire more people or give their current workers more hours, which again costs them money. Money which could be better spent on the summer's RV or boat, I guess. Anyway, they said that them and others tried to alert management to the uncomfortable and toxic work environment, but they were ignored. Like a lot of us, I couldn't afford to walk off the job at that moment. I needed another job, and I had to just stick it out. The store is one of several Biggby coffee franchises owned by Mohammed Shatta in Michigan and beyond. Similar issues allegedly happened at other locations he owned, prompting staff to walk off the job in Toledo, Ohio in 2021 and Lansing in 2022, per news reports. And just to give you a little bit of context, yeah, it's a very similar news report out of Lansing, and they basically said, this is from May 15th, 2022. You have employees there in Lansing talking about how the management would verbally abuse us, yelling at us, being really mean the way they would correct us. And you had a similar situation where 5 employees quit and walked out on the job. One of them mentioned getting screamed at every day, which made me scared going to work, not knowing what to expect. And again, that's way too much stress to be having to deal with at your your, I was going to say 9 to 5, but whatever job and whatever hours that you have. There's something that I often talk about with my coworkers about is just like, nobody likes workplace drama. It's like, I have enough real problems in my normal life. I don't need more at work, and you certainly don't need some manager yelling and screaming at you so that you can hawk the lattes 5% faster, or whatever such metrics. But yeah, it's pretty amazing to see that, like, we have a pattern of behavior from this management across the same coffee franchise. And one would think, Biggby is not a huge enterprise. They've got locations in this little chunk of the Midwest. One would think they would not want their reputation to sour, because again, like, Biggby kind of goes off of that. While it is a chain, they do have like that kind of small town energy, and more and more locations basically start treating or allowing their employees to be treated like toilet paper. People are going to look elsewhere. Um, Going on, you can find that article on MLive/Kalamazoo Gazette. That was mass exodus at Kalamazoo Biggby, ex-employees allege toxic workplace. I also think this is an important story to underscore, again, the importance of organizing your workplace. The place in Kalamazoo, the place in Toledo, the place in Lansing. If workers had gotten together and organized themselves, maybe like a Biggby baristas union, or something like that, they could start fighting this with collective power. They'd be in a situation where they could hold on to their jobs and basically set the terms to their employer. Now, that's a scary thing to do, but so is walking out of your job. And the big plus to trying to do that kind of organizing is, while it is scary, it also means more security. It means your job is more secure, and you don't have to go out in the community and try to find somewhere else. Start throwing out your job applications, throw your bill pay schedule into precarity. Fighting that fight where you are at, again, gives you more leverage to try to improve not only the conditions at your workplace, but the conditions in your life, because that stability means less stress and more time for you to deal with real life problems. So, if anybody is interested, there's a lot of organizations around that are trying to help people organize their workplaces. If anybody's listening to this episode and would like some resources, please get a hold of us. You can email us at mediacyphers@gmail.com, send us a message on our Facebook page, or leave a comment on our YouTube. Anyway, we're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast, which you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. This next story is about tenants organizing and tenant power here in the state of Michigan. It's kind of close to me because that's one of the big things I organize around when I am not here in the studio. And I actually this story got on my radar in an interesting way. I always check all the local news and when I'm preparing materials for today's show, and I found a piece on WWMT that the whole way they framed it was very interesting, and I'm going to go into that in a bit. Um, but I wanted to first give everybody some proper context of what I'm talking about. But there is a new effort in Lansing to push some bills that are designed to help strengthen the living conditions and legal protections for renters in the state of Michigan. I want to read this article that sums it up from the Michigan Chronicle. Headline: Michigan lawmakers push tenant empowerment bills to address unsafe rental conditions, written by Ebony J.J. Curry, published on June 16th. Renters across Michigan are living in properties with mold, rodents, broken furnaces, and collapsing ceilings. Yet many have no legal protection, with landlords ignore urgent repair requests. That reality is what prompted a new set of bills in the Michigan legislature designed to give tenants more power and hold negligent landlords accountable. The tenant empowerment package, made up of 4 bills, aims to confront Michigan's rental housing crisis by establishing clear rights for renters and setting enforcement timelines when safety is at risk. It's a legislative effort rooted in the lived conditions of families whose homes have been red tagged, apartments that threaten public health, and communities that have long been silenced in housing policy. Senate Bills 19 and 20 propose that if a landlord fails to address safety-related repair requests within 48 hours, tenants would have the right to withhold rent or pay for repairs themselves and deduct the cost from their rent. By the way, just to emphasize, that is already legal, right to repair, and what it's called holding your rent in escrow. Those are both legal. However, what this bill in particular would do is the timetable on those things is a little fuzzy. There isn't anything in the current law that gives you concise, sometimes it depends on the municipality, sometimes 30 days, sometimes 60 days. There's a lot of variance. Having just one standard throughout the state of Michigan would be really helpful for organizers across the state at having, again, something consistent that they can tell other tenants when they are organizing. So these bills are designed to give renters a path to action with their calls, emails, and formal complaints go unanswered. The bill is really making sure that we are targeting and holding accountable those who are bad actors, said Remy Gelderloos, Deputy Chief of Staff for State Senator Sarah Anthony of Lansing, who co-sponsored the package. The legislation responds to a pattern seen across the state. In Lansing, hundreds of rental homes have been red tagged, deemed legally uninhabitable due to serious health and safety violations. These properties often remain occupied, with tenants trapped by poverty, lack of access to legal help, or fear of retaliation. Similar stories surface from Detroit to Flint, where low income Black residents are disproportionately impacted by dangerous housing conditions and have historically been denied consistent legal recourse. We're seeing similar things across the state, Gelderloo said, and we want to try to nip away at the overall housing crisis. This is one direct way that makes sense. Senate Bill 21 focuses on financial protection. It would require landlords to provide 90 days written notice before raising the rents when renewing a lease. Currently, many tenants receive little or no notice before facing increased housing costs. This bill gives renters time to prepare, relocate, or explore legal options before being priced out of their homes. That added time could be life changing for Detroit seniors living on fixed incomes or single mothers working hourly jobs to keep their families stable. Senate Bill 22 proposes that security deposits be returned electronically. Though seemingly administrative, this change directly addresses the way many tenants lose access to hundreds or thousands of dollars. When landlords delay returns or claim damages without proof, tenants are left with little ability to recover funds. And anybody who has lived in, well, the Vine, but anywhere in the, you know the whole safety deposit swindle. I think the most ridiculous one I had was um, the year that again, 30, I think it was like 30 days notice. Thanks a lot. I think his name was Scott, if I remember. Thanks a lot, Scott. And when we moved everything out in a total hurry and we got the job done, and he sends us pictures of the scratched up floor from 2 tenants ago. He claimed that like dog scratches. So it's like we haven't had a dog here since like 2 leases ago. And you didn't say anything then. Anyway, yeah, again, it was uh and what was interesting about that is there wasn't that kind of damage, but he was crying foul about it so much that he actually got us in a defensive position saying he wanted more money. And I had to write a very sternly worded letter saying, like, you have your deposit, don't need anything else. Of course, it'd be worth wondering if I could have probably gotten the deposit back. Always just everybody, here's some advice. Always take pictures before you move in and right after you leave, so the landlord can't be making some stuff on you and trying to sneak away with your deposit. Anyway. Together, the bills also add a critical requirement. If mold or pest infestations are reported, landlords must fix the problem within 72 hours. In many Black households across Michigan, pest infestations and toxic mold have gone unresolved for months, even years. The impact of these conditions isn't cosmetic, it's about respiratory illness, mental distress, and unsafe living environments. This is critical to someone's life and safety, Gelderloo emphasized. But we also need to understand and work with landlords, property owners, and others in the industry because sometimes it takes time. Lawmakers have built these timelines 48 hours for safety related repairs, 72 hours for mold or pest removal to reflect both tenant urgency and property management logistics. They are not designed to be punitive, they are built to protect. At the end of the day, the solution is good for tenants, it's good for those responsible landlords, and it's good for the health of our housing market overall. That distinction is important. Not every landlord opposes tenant protections. Many already comply with maintenance standards, offer fair lease renewals, and support timely communication. But these bills name what has too often been protected in silence. There are landlords in Michigan who collect rent while leaving tenants in unsafe, unsanitary, and illegal conditions. This legislative package gives the state a formal tool to distinguish the responsible property owners from those who profit off of neglect. The tenant empowerment package has passed through committee is now moving to the full Senate for a vote. If passed, it would shift the legal framework around renting in Michigan, placing enforceable accountability on landlords while giving tenants clear, actionable rights. I'm going to go down in just a little bit further down in this article. Michigan has already proven that policy can respond to people power. Detroit's ordinance didn't pass because leadership suddenly prioritized poor tenants, and this is referring to some reforms they made to tenant landlord law in Detroit, which was successful. The statewide legislation follows that same path, designed not for headlines, but for the families whose lives hang in the balance when lawmakers delay action. Tenants are not asking for a handout. They're demanding the right to live in homes that won't harm them. The Senate vote on this package will reveal which leaders understand that housing is a human right and which ones remain comfortable protecting a system where survival depends on silence. For Detroiters who have long been navigating power outages, burst pipes, or infestations without recourse, these bills could represent more than reform. They could affirm dignity in housing, not through charity or short term relief, but through law. And that matters. Black renters have historically been the most vulnerable to housing injustice in Michigan, from redlining and eviction targeting to lead poisoning and housing court disparities. The weight of bad housing policy doesn't just rest on infrastructure, it rests on people. It stunts development, it harms health, and it strips stability. The 90-day rent increase notice isn't just about logistics. It's about giving families time to stay housed. 48-hour repair mandate doesn't just address broken property, ensures no child sleeps under a collapsing ceiling. The electronic deposit return isn't just about modern convenience. It's about economic justice for people already living with less. These are the layers of housing policy too often overlooked when lawmakers only speak to homeowners. But renters, particularly Black renters, are the backbone of Michigan's urban centers, and their lives deserve legal protections that reflect their humanity. So I wanted to read that article because it is such a heavy contrast. By the way, that's a well-written article. I haven't gone to the Michigan Chronicle too often, but they are a Black focused publication out of Detroit that focuses again on Michigan issues, Michigan Chronicle. But I want to contrast that with the way WWMT covered it, which is it's a station owned by the Sinclair media conglomerate. The media conglomerate Sinclair. Sinclair Broadcasting. Here's the blurb. They say a set of bills heading the Michigan Senate could grant renters more rights and protections while holding property owners accountable for unfit or dangerous living conditions. The tenant empowerment package is a set of 4 bills aiming to place strict deadlines on property owners when it comes to maintaining rental properties, raising rental rates, and returning security deposits. According to Erica Farley, executive director for the Rental Property Owners Association of Michigan, the bill package is taking a hatchet to something that needs a scalpel. Farley's concern is that the bill would negatively affect the vast majority of property owners who are dedicated to the safety of their tenants, rather than addressing the larger issue of the property owners who are not. And then they frame it as a poll. Do you agree with increased regulations on how landlords deal with maintenance, rent, and security deposits? Okay, so let me break down a couple of things for you. So the article from the Michigan Chronicle is a lot more even-handed, even so far as sorry, my phone's ringing. Even so far as when okay, I kind of lost my thought there. Okay, even so far as when they're talking about how this is going to affect landlords. The article from Michigan Chronicle goes out of its way to say, for landlords that are doing the right thing, this is not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, it's something that they could support. Whereas the article from WWT is completely one-sided. Do they get a quote from Sarah Anthony and Lansing who's pushing this? Do they get a quote from any of the rental or housing advocacy groups that are pushing it? No. They go to the Rental Properties Owners Association and ask for them to speak on it. That is the only pull quote in the article. It is framing the issue in a very specific way to try to make you sympathize with rental property owners. And again, letting them make that statement, take a hatchet to something that needs a scalpel without anything to back it up, without any nuance or any actual analysis of the bill that would lead credence to that. I also think it's interesting the way they even frame the polling question. Do you agree with increased regulations on how landlords deal with maintenance, rent, security deposits? Regulation is something that a lot of Americans have been trained to see as a negative thing. It's again, the conservatives have done a really good job over the last couple of decades in making that kind of a scare with, government overreach, regulations. When again, most government regulations are making sure you don't get poison in your milk, or that there's a railing on your at your on-site job that you don't fall into a vat of molten steel or something. But yeah, they so again, Sinclair Broadcasting, a conservative leaning media conglomerate, owns local news stations across the country. It owns WWMT, and it's very interesting that they frame this whole story and this question from a pro landlord perspective, whereas the independent black publication from Detroit is definitely a lot more even-handed, goes into the necessity of the bill, goes into how even some landlords are responding to it. Again, much more thorough, whereas the one from WWMT looks like it's trying to kind of elicit a specific response. Here's the funny thing. You can go do the poll right now, and granted, not a lot of people have voted on it yet, like 193. But right now, they are at 79% yes, 21% no. So even framing it as pro landlord as you possibly can, people by like a 4 to 5 margin are still saying, yeah, those landlords need to get regulated and get GTFOs. Anyway, you can find we'll link to both of those articles in our show notes, but whether it's actually going to pass in Lansing is an open question. The Michigan legislature is a funny thing. It's one would think, the Republicans are definitely going to try to kill it. Whether they can get enough crossover votes for this, it remains an open question. Or even, if Whipper will sign off on it when it gets there. But we'll follow this bill, see if it gets killed on the floor or if it has a firmer trajectory. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at YouTube, Facebook, or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Now going to be pivoting to a climate related story, and this comes to us from Bridge, Michigan, and it focuses a lot on Kalamazoo and the particular talking about the Kalamazoo Climate Change Coalition, Climate Crisis Coalition, sorry. So we're going to be kind of going back and forth. It's a very thorough article. We're not going to be reading it in its entirety, but there were a couple of bits to it specific to Kalamazoo that I really wanted to spend some time on. This is an article from Bridge, Michigan, headline Michigan Cities Fight Effects of Climate Change. It was written by Julie J. Riddle, originally Southwest Michigan Second Wave Media. And talking about, again, a lot of the climate issues very specific to Kalamazoo. There's no place like home, except when stormwater drizzles through your roof or a heat wave turns a poorly insulated bedroom into an oven. While many think of climate change as a far-off threat, already changing weather patterns are decreasing water quality, increasing illness, and worsening air pollution. The physically and financially most vulnerable residents feel such effects the most, with the least ability to do anything about it. If conditions continue at the current pace, the Great Lakes region will increasingly see warmer, wetter winters and drier, longer summers, according to researchers at the University of Michigan, Michigan State University, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. The in-between seasons will be longer and stormier, according to the EPA. Local governments around Michigan have begun using regulations to protect against the impact of a changing climate. Several have passed so-called climate action plans to address the effects of climate change within their borders. New efforts in Kalamazoo, for example, show how going green can boost local economies while keeping people most susceptible to the harm of climate change safe in their own homes. At the Creamery Apartments, climate-conscious features from careful water use to rooftop solar arrays help low-income residents save money while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. As in several low-income neighborhoods, a multi-million-dollar project was slated to upgrade hundreds of aging local homes to help their residents cope with the climate changes already impacting Michigan. Federal funding reductions have endangered that project, though organizers hope to continue it even at a smaller scale. When everyone is healthier and safer, the community as a whole wins, says Ginny Dozema, the executive director of the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition, which is heading up the home repair program. We need to change the way that we've been doing business as usual so that we can try to save as much of the current way that we live as possible, she says. It's really important. Residents of Kalamazoo's poorest neighborhoods lack the resources to recover from extreme weather, according to an April draft of the city's latest Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan. The plan warns of a disproportionate impact to the health, safety, and economic stability of low-income communities. Some of that change is already here, says Taylor Van Winkle, Climate Sustainability Coordinator for Kalamazoo County. Take, for example, the tornado that destroyed property in Portage last year, or the at least 13 tornadoes reported in Michigan on a single day in late March this year, with another 12 spotted on May 15th. Then, too, there's the rain. Kalamazoo residents know about that rain. Man, Kalamazoo experienced above average precipitation every month of 2024 and is considered at extreme risk of excess precipitation over the next 25 years. Summers now last several weeks longer than they did decades ago, Van Winkle says. It's getting hotter too. By 2050, the Kalamazoo region is expected to quadruple its number of days warmer than 90 degrees. And shorter freezing periods in winter mean more pests to invade homes in summer. Van Winkle joined the county staff in 2023 in a grant-funded position, tasked with helping each of the county's departments address and prepare for global warming's impact on the county. Van Winkle's now collating resident concerns and the input of an advisory council to create a climate action and climate justice plan for the county. The plan is intended as a guide to better prepare the county, including its most vulnerable residents, for climate hazards. Socially vulnerable populations are disproportionately hurt by climate change, including more reported experiences of asthma, decreased income, and death related to global warming, the EPA reports. A family with limited income, for example, can't afford repairs when a tree falls on their roof in a storm. When rain seeps in and causes mold, they can't afford to move to a safer home. A child with still developing lungs and poorly sealed windows coughs through the ever-lengthening pollen seasons. Her uninsured mother unable to afford a trip to the doctor. Elderly residents with mobility problems can't pay to get their aging air conditioner fixed or easily get to a cooling center. As the climate changes, vulnerable populations will be hit first and hardest, Van Winkle says. Michigan has been called a climate haven, indicating its conditions favorable to human life will stick around longer than, for example, southern states, which could someday become unbearably hot. That doesn't mean you're not going to have to change and adapt, Van Winkle says. Communities can get ahead of the game by shoring up their housing and other infrastructure sooner rather than later. From attracting potential residents who want a climate-ready community to avoiding devastating loss and expense after a catastrophic incident, Van Winkle says there's economic benefit to preparing now. There's also the benefit of, not dying. Not dying is a pretty, I think that's a little bit of a stronger incentive than the economic benefit. What's the economic benefit to not going extinct? The benefits abound. Anyway, because again, I love this article and it's covering some really important stuff, but I can't help but be somewhat bemused by like the use of a lot of this like business language and stuff around it. Because I've been very vocal about Kalamazoo needing to be prepared for climate change. I think one of the things that really gets left out of this is the intersection of the housing crisis with climate change. If things are really going to get that bad in the rest of this hemisphere and things are going to be that much better in Kalamazoo, people are going to be showing up here. We need to have housing stock and we need to make sure we haven't been gentrified out of our neighborhoods by the time climate refugees really start pouring into Kalamazoo. It's also not something I really heard a lot of people in these circles talk about. Nothing against them, but the connection between housing precarity, refugees, and climate is going to become one congealed problem in the not so distant future. It's really important, I think, for us as community organizers and people in our communities to try to start getting ahead of that. Because again, we're talking about the climate crisis is here, and it's again only a decade or two away where I think we're really going to start seeing that in some numbers. Going on, zoning laws are Kalamazoo's best tool to encourage climate-resistant housing and other infrastructure, says Justin Kish, sustainability planner for the city of Kalamazoo. The city declared a climate emergency in 2019, out of which both its sustainability plan and Kish's position were born. The plan's goals include increasing residential density, expanding climate-friendly transportation options, and reducing reliance on forms of energy that hurt the environment. Such changes become increasingly important as climate shifts become increasingly noticeable. It's changing rainfall patterns, changing weather. You've also got pockets of drought, Kish says. Things are getting wonky. As the city gets wetter, protecting its water systems will reduce the flooding in residential areas. A Natural Features Protection Review Board ensures development plans meet standards that protect steep slopes and limit land clearing around creeks and other water features. Careful management of such areas helps ensure water flows into the ground and away from homes, Kish says. You don't want to just turn everything to a parking lot, like Joni Mitchell said, Kish said. The city isn't in the home building business, but Kish says it can use zoning decisions to promote new construction of climate friendly housing, including apartment and mixed use buildings. And that is really important. The amount of green space in Kalamazoo needs to remain consistent, if not increase, because that helps soak up a lot of the extra rain. And looking at the forecast for the next 50 years, there's going to be a lot of extra rain in Kalamazoo. So going on. When destructive weather hits, dense housing allows snowplows and emergency vehicles to reach more people more quickly, using less energy than in a more spread out area. A large building housing both residents and commercial space puts residents closer to the things they need, reducing the number of cars on the road that emit carbon dioxide. They're basically talking about walkable neighborhoods here. Dense housing also makes public transportation more practical, reducing harmful emissions. Last year, Kalamazoo was awarded a $1 million federal grant to plant trees on the city's north side, a measure meant to combat climate change fueled heat in a lower income residential part of town. That grant is in limbo, along with other promised federal funding nationwide, Kish says. And by the way, not to poo poo the idea of planting trees on the north side, but as we have reported consistently over the years, Graphic Packaging International has often turned the north side into a sacrifice zone. We have much larger rates of asthma and lung-based cancers in that area, and that has to do with industrial pollution. So yeah, planting a few trees next to it. Well, again, I know it's part of a different program with a different focus. It definitely rings a little tone deaf to me, but anyway. City is enrolled with SolSmart, a program that helps local governments enable the use of solar energy among its residents and businesses. Last year, the city bought a dozen homeowners together for a bulk buy of solar equipment, adding 50 some kilowatts of solar energy to the power grid. During the next heat wave, you don't have to worry about those 12 homes sucking all the energy to run their AC. The more renewables we can get on the grid, the better. Environmentally friendly construction used to mean building with reclaimed materials and being completely off the grid, says Matt Hollander, president of Hollander Development Corporation, and the developer behind the Creamery in Kalamazoo. One of only two local buildings with a rare platinum certified rating from the U.S. Green Building Council, the other being the Alumni Center at Western Michigan University, the mixed use, low to moderate income housing building uses modern methods and environmentally friendly materials in its approach to energy, water, and air quality. Long trains of solar panels on the creamery's roof, enough to power 7 small single-family homes, contribute to a reduced drain on the power grid. Specialized heat pumps on the roof pull heat out of the air and use it to warm each apartment. Utilities that might cost his residents as much as $200 per month elsewhere run about $68 per month because of the creamery's efficient furnace, draftless windows, and other efficiencies. The electrified building requires very little natural gas, reducing carbon dioxide emissions and decreasing poisoning risks. The building's low-flow toilets and faucets use a minimum of fresh water, passing the savings along to residents and depleting less from community reserves. In addition to a rooftop rain garden, a drain system funnels rainwaters to planters around the building, where climbing plants grow up trellises. Targeted redirection of rainwater is important in that part of town, Hollander says, with a neighborhood half a block to the west situated in a 100-year floodplain and susceptible to bad flooding. And going to go down just a little bit, talking about some more about the Climate Crisis Coalition. Last year, advocacy group Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition declared its intent to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by providing energy efficiency upgrades in local homes. The coalition of more than 40 local organizations designed the Holistic Healthy Homes Project, originally granted $18.9 million by the US EPA. The funds were removed this month in a broad sweep of terminations targeting Inflation Reduction Act funds. DOESMA of the Kalamazoo Climate Crisis Coalition said, yeah, i.e. Doge, it got doged. The coalition and the county are joining a class action lawsuit disputing the decision. In the meantime, DOESMA said in an emailed statement, "We are doing our best to pursue funds to keep going. We will not be able to proceed with the full-scale project as $19 million is a generational award and hard to replace. We will scale back and seek funds to achieve a smaller and slower progress on outcomes while we proceed with litigation." And by the way, this is, something that I hear a lot. Elections have consequences. And I don't really mean that in the sense that, like, oh, more people should have gone and voted for Kamala to stop Trump. It's like, we really needed to push some sort of, again, if we were going to do this the easier way, what we needed was like 10 years ago, 10 years ago, most realistically, some sort of real progressive insurgency kind of going off the back of what, Bernie Sanders was doing. And there's been efforts to do that. I don't want to minimize that, but this is the result of elections having consequences, of people being tuned out. Again, the vast majority of Americans who support progressive policies, A, not coming out to vote, and B, demanding accountability from the politicians who are supposed to be representing their interests. I get, I was listening to this podcast with Kenyatta Mata Taylor, and it's kind of posing this what if, like, what if more pressure had been put down on the Biden administration to make Build Back Better actually do everything it said it was going to do? Would we be living in some different times right now? With what would have actually been the result of that? Obviously, there'd probably been a lot more goodwill to Joe Biden, at least before he put his rubber stamp on genociding people in Gaza. But at the very least, it would have put us on a more solid footing to try to address in a very concrete and on the ground way the greatest crisis perhaps humanity has ever faced. So, there is that. Going on, they're talking more about the Holistic Healthy Homes Project. The project would provide structural and other upgrades to 300 owner-occupied homes in 4 low-income city neighborhoods. Such repairs are badly needed to make Kalamazoo's aging housing stock more energy efficient, according to DOESMA, which is very true. I live in the Vine neighborhood. We've got the whole historic commission is a really big deal there. A lot of those houses are from the 19th century, but they're also not really built to insulate particularly well. They get cold in the winter and very hot during the summer. Anybody who's lived in the Vine know you live in those big houses, expect some very high utility bills because of the way that the heat and the cooling kind of just leaks out. The planned repairs could mean a roof that doesn't leak, appliances that use less water and energy, or insulated walls that keep the heat bills down in the winter. This would mean less drafty windows and upgraded electrical systems that make electricity go further. And make sure that folks aren't left behind, DOESMA says. The original Holistic Healthy Homes project would have included upgrades to 4 neighborhood centers to create climate resiliency hubs to serve as safe havens during weather emergencies. It also incorporates training programs intended to boost the green construction workforce. People living in low-income housing often have little to no access to better housing, nor to programs to allow them to invest in the places they do live, DOESMA says. They usually lack insurance or emergency funds to pay for repairs and lack the clout to fight for regulations to keep pollutants out of their homes, which lose value as they become less safe. BridgeMI envisions low-income Kalamazoo homes where lower monthly bills means residents can pay more for food, self-care, and other needed life improvements. Healthier bodies will mean better attendance at school and work, better job performance, and fewer medical bills. Increased property values will mean homeowners have something to pass along to future generations. Meanwhile, climate proofing 300 homes would have ripple effects across the area. Numerous planned repairs would put numerous contractors and construction workers to work and put dollars in their pockets to spend in the community, all while reducing dangerous emissions overall. Climate change is the biggest threat we face. It's the most important thing for us to be preparing for as a global society. Her organization's project asks, what does it look like to prepare ourselves for a future that's here and threatening life as we know it? The planned home repairs are one step toward changing the path that we're on so that the overall climate impacts are less than we're headed toward right now. Again, you can find that article, Bridge, Michigan. It's written by Julie J. Riddle, published on June 16th. Michigan City's Fight Effects of Climate Change. We're going to take another quick break. We come back. We've got some updates about ICE. And then we'll also be pivoting to some national and international stories in the next hour. Keep it dial locked. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online, Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast, which is podcasting on most platforms. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. I want to talk briefly about the assassination that happened out in Minnesota. If you don't know what happened, a man named Vance Bolter was accused of assassinating Democratic state lawmaker Melissa Hartman and her husband in their home, as well as shooting State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. He also had a long, basically hit list they found, which included a lot of other Democratic politicians, Planned Parenthood senators, including people like Ilhan Omar and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. I'm actually going to quote directly from Keith Ellison. He was interviewed this morning by Democracy Now! And hear what he has to say about what happened in Minnesota. This is him speaking out on Melissa Hartman, who sadly passed away from their injuries. I met her before either one of us were in politics. Melissa Hartman was a legal aid lawyer. When I met her, she was representing a tenant, an African American woman, mother of three, who had been the target of discrimination and abuse by her landlord. It was alleged that the landlord would say things like, hey, girls don't have to pay rent if they're nice, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And this particular tenant was very lucky to have Melissa Hartman as her lawyer, who fought and won a very large judgment against this landlord. I actually represented the same client in another matter, and so Melissa and I got to know each other. I went to the state legislature, she went, and we got to be really good friends. And she was always on the right side of the issues, had a strong moral compass, and was always pragmatic and willing to reach across the aisle and try to come up with some solutions that work for everyone. And she rose to the level of speaker. I went on the U.S. Congress, and I got to admit, I tried to convince her to run in the 3rd Congressional District, but she said, no, I'm here in Minnesota. I'm going to stay here in Minnesota and serve the state of Minnesota. I don't have any aspirations for Washington. And she did a wonderful job. She helped lead on the issue of the child tax credit, universal school meals, driver's license for everybody, paid sick and family leave in the state of Minnesota, and also expansions in healthcare, prescription drug pricing. She was just as dedicated to trying to make people's lives easier, and she was pretty effective at it. She also knew that sometimes she had to take the hard vote, and she did, because she knew she had to land that budget negotiation. But right up until we lost her, she was fiercely fighting for people, always polite and always kind. And by the way, she was really funny, and she had a great smile that could lighten up any room. She had a great sense of humor, was sort of a joker, and could lighten up the mood with her sense of humor. I am really going to miss her, and I know everybody will here. We loved her. She was the best. I will link to that in the show notes. I did want to also comment very briefly on, Republican Senator Mike Lee, before any evidence was out, tried to shift the blame of this onto Marxists. He tweeted out, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way," next to the picture of the alleged gunman, which again is just completely made up out of whole cloth. And let me explain the reason Republican Senator Mike Lee would put out such an obvious lie that was disproven basically as soon as we found it. Again, um, Vaughn was found to be a right wing activist, kind of far right politics, involved in like private security, or no, Vance Bolter. I'm sorry. So it's like again, completely as far away from being a quote unquote Marxist as one can get. But what the reason they say stuff like that is because again, a lie will circle the world 50 times before the truth gets the light of day. So yeah, it gets pretty quickly disproven that is not the character of it. But if you are somebody who's maybe like on the right, you don't really vet your information, the thing you're going to take away from this is that some Marxist went up and shot up some state senators in Minnesota. And that's the nugget you're going to remember in your head. And it adds to this narrative that there's these violent, far left activists around the country who are going around killing people, which is literally not the case. We continue to see right wing violence, even in cases where like a right wing politician has been targeted, like Donald Trump. That's a former supporter who went off the rails. So I do this to highlight the way that the left's ideological opponents use the media and the news cycle to launder their propaganda. In this case, again, Mike Lee shooting this obvious lie out into the ether so that it would spread around just enough before the truth, sees the light of day. I want to move on now, talk a little bit about the No Kings march and protest. There was a huge one over here, over on Drake Road. Thousands of people lined up on either side. It's been kind of interesting watching the trajectory of these No Kings marches, and again, the whole 50-51 group, which is to say, it has a different okay, I've heard some people on the left criticize these protests, rightfully for, they're backed by corporate donors and they don't really critique the Democratic Party. Some of the participants did. There was a great couple speakers out of the Ann Arbor rally that said some important points about how, the Democrats are also part of this problem too. Capitalism is the main issue, etc. And for the way that like the hashtag resistance and the first age of Trump would definitely felt more like a container, a way to contain people from radicalizing or trying to keep their politics regressed. I think what we're seeing with this one is almost the opposite. Like there's no way to really contain how people are getting radicalized by what the Trump administration has been doing. It's not as easy to just try to keep everybody, contained so they can go out to brunch. And there were a few people out there like that. Let's get back to brunch. But for the most part, the American people, the American worker, is in a much different place than they were 10 years ago, and it is much more difficult to try to, basically insulate their politics from a more radical critique than it used to be. So I'm going to read this article. This is from LeftVoice. This is written by James Dennis Hoff. Saturday's mass protests show Trump's reactionary agenda has less support than ever. Trump came into office falsely claiming that he had a mandate for a reactionary program of deportations, tariffs, austerity, and tax breaks for the rich. But that agenda and Trump's strong arm anti-great democratic tactics for implementing it are now coming up against a huge and growing wave of popular resistance. For the last 6 months, Trump and his handpicked cabinet of curiosities, billionaire fanboys, and state and local political allies have executed a series of relentless and often illegal attacks on unions, immigrants, trans and queer people, federal workers, the movement for Palestine, and institutions of higher education, all in an attempt to weaken dissent, consolidate executive power, instill fear, and pander to the whims of his populist base. Simultaneously, Trump has attempted to appease more traditional sectors of the ruling class, who are increasingly uncomfortable with the instability his policies are creating, with the promise of huge tax cuts and deregulation that will facilitate more exploitation and short term profits. This radical, often contradictory, and disruptive agenda has led to a series of crises within his ruling coalition, represented most notably by his recent very public breakup with Elon Musk, but has also generated a wave of public backlash. From the spontaneous town hall protests, the vandalism against Tesla dealerships, and the hands off demonstrations in April, to the current uprisings in LA and other cities against ICE, agents carrying out Trump's deportation program, millions of people have taken to the streets to protest the Trump administration in the last 6 months. Saturday's absolutely enormous nationwide protests were yet another example, and perhaps the largest one yet, of the rising anger against the Trump administration's policies. While preparations were being made for Trump's ludicrous $45 million military birthday parade, complete with paratroopers and about 130 N-1 Abrams tanks, masses of people were heading out to protest in small towns and major metropolitan centers around the country. From LA and San Diego to Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and New York City, hundreds of thousands and perhaps millions of protesters took to the streets for what organizers called a No Kings Day, a reference to the widely held argument that Trump is attempting to create king-like powers for himself in his second term. Largely leaderless and without a central agenda other than confronting Trump, the protests offered up a smorgasbord of the various complaints against the second Trump administration from the liberal center to the left. Most of those protesting came out to express concern about the erosion of democratic rights and to condemn Trump's authoritarian tactics and his attempts to increase the reach of executive power over the entirety of the federal government. Signs compared Trump to various kings and dictators, including Italian fascist Benito Mussolini, where others made the case more explicitly that resisting Trump was about resisting fascism. However, many protesters also expressed outrage and anger with ICE and Trump's immigration policies, while others showed up in keffiyehs and with Palestinian flags in support of the people of Gaza, as well as signs demanding the release of Mahmoud Khalil. In New York City, perhaps the biggest single demonstration in the country, despite the rain, close to 100,000 protesters turned out to fill Fifth Avenue, marching from the flagship public library branch at 42nd Street to Madison Square Park, 20 blocks south. Demonstrations in New York included far more young people and a much stronger anti-ICE and pro-Palestinian politics compared to many of the demonstrations in smaller cities. The NYPD responded to the peaceful marches in full riot gear. Meanwhile, in LA, which has been witness to some of the fiercest resistance to Trump's immigration policies, more than 40,000 people marched through downtown LA, carrying signs criticizing ICE, calling Trump a fascist, and demanding that the National Guard leave the city. Immediately after the protest, continuing demonstrations in front of the federal building at City Hall were violently put down by mounted police officers who trampled and beat protesters with their batons as the California National Guard units looked on. At least one demonstrator was seen being carried away unconscious after being stomped on by a horse. These demonstrations, despite the lack of a clear delineation from the Democrats and the broader ruling class, indeed, there were an unfortunate number of signs in support of Kamala Harris and brunch, are nonetheless an incredibly progressive development. They are the expression of a strong sentiment toward defending democratic rights and immigrants and reflect a growing resistance to Trump's entire agenda. Like Occupy, which captured the amorphous outrage that grew out of the economic crisis of 2008, these demonstrations are also an expression of a larger, simmering discontent with the entire system and are yet another sign of the ongoing organic crisis that has consumed the United States since Trump's first presidency. However, we saw how these very same kinds of mobilizations during Trump's first term were co-opted by the liberal ruling class. We saw how they channeled the outrage against Trump and the mobilizations against police violence and for Black lives back into the Democratic Party, the failed presidency of Biden and Harris. In fact, once all the dust has settled, their biggest lasting legacy may very well turn out to be that they made a second Trump presidency possible. We cannot let that happen again. The Democrats want to weaken and co-opt the movement. They want to separate these protests against Trump from the protests of the precarious youth, immigrants, and union members in LA fighting against deportations. They want to separate the so-called good protesters from the bad. They want to de-escalate the fight in LA, which has the possibility of igniting a broader national movement against deportations, though through temporary concessions and court orders, even as they continue to collaborate with ICE and support the United States' reactionary immigration policies. In order to develop and continue to grow this movement to confront Trump, it is important that we build a broad but class independent united front that includes the rank and file of all the labor unions, as well as organizations of the anti capitalist left, both of which, with some exceptions, seem to have been largely absent from Saturday's actions. No matter how limited and liberal the politics of some of these marches may have been, sitting on the sidelines when millions of people are on the streets expressing their anger at the government, fighting for democratic rights, is no way to build the left or the labor movement. We cannot rely exclusively on the vanguard to defeat Trump. There's a huge window of opportunity to organize the masses of young people, working people, union members, students, immigrants, and all the oppressed who turned out to these protests with anti capitalist politics and working class methods of struggle, including the formation of neighborhood assemblies to collectively and seriously debate the politics and next steps of the movement, mass walkouts, and strikes. That article is on LeftVoice, is written by James Dennis Hoff. Saturday's mass protest show Trump's reactionary agenda has less support than ever. All right, everybody, we're going to take another quick little break, come back, talk a little bit about what's going on over in the Israel-Iran conflict. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. I want to talk a little bit about, again, so as you've probably heard, Tel Aviv and Tehran have exchanged missiles, or Iran and Israel. I'll give you a quick breakdown of kind of the geopolitics of all of this. I'm going to probably close out with an article about Israel targeting a TV station in Iran. But I wanted to comment on a couple things. So, a lot of y'all are probably wondering, like, why everything's already such a big mess. Why is the Israeli government doing this? Well, it's for a couple of reasons. For Netanyahu, it's a very self-serving move. It's to distract both from the failures in Gaza, but also to kind of shore up more support for him at home. It's Iran has been the perennial boogeyman for Israel for a long time. A lot of their media will, again, just pumps up Iran as this existential threat any chance they get. And Netanyahu, by kind of forcing this conflict, again, he does that. He gets tries to kind of ratchet up the jingoism at home. use that to keep him out of jail another day. Because keep in mind, he's got pending charges that are going to be filed against him the moment he's no longer prime minister. So again, a part of this literally is about staying out of jail. We've also had this interesting back and forth teeter-totter because most recently President Trump belligerently warned everybody to evacuate Tehran, whatever that means. They're going to bomb the hell out of it or whatnot. And at the same time, he also has a lot of people in his base who, again, thought he was very sincere about no more foreign interventions, no more foreign wars, and oh boy, I'm really sorry. Like, I'm sorry to some of these people who are feeling genuinely disappointed. I don't want to say I told you so, but I will say welcome. Again, I'm sorry you didn't clock that he was a liar before now, but now you do. And what exactly the United States gets out of this, or what Trump gets out of it, is kind of remains to be seen. Some people were speculating that he'd be a little bit more upset because this kind of just sabotages the efforts to put forward like a peace plan. But we are on the edge of the U.S. taking a more overt role in Israel's war, again, undeclared war on Iran. That, by the way, a lot of the media is ignoring the fact that Israel struck first. Like Iran and everything they've done is a direct response to them assassinating leadership and airstrikes on some of their nuclear facilities. So it's been a very bad weekend for peace, that's for sure. It's likely only going to escalate from here, especially if Trump kind of puts the money where his mouth is on his threats to Tehran. How the domestic scene is going to respond to us getting embroiled in a quagmire in Iran is a big question. They're not going to like it. I think this even has a potential to peel off some of Trump's people who also do not really want these foreign interventions to be going on and happening. It's also been pretty astounding to see like Netanyahu talking about how this is going to save the state of Israel, how they were going to like nuke us any minute. And by the way, as of right now, Iran has been pretty open and transparent about their nuclear program. Although a lot of people speculate this actually might push them further to developing a nuclear weapon because a lot of states, rightfully so, see it as the only way to really defend yourself against a colonizing entity or empire. If you say I can shoot back at you with these nukes, you're much less likely to get invaded. You know, a lot of hay is made about how insane the North Korean government is, but the reason they have nuclear weapons is a very practical one. It's so that the U.S. or Europe or all the other colonial powers can't gang up on them because they have the nuclear deterrent. And yeah, if I were in Iran, I might feel sleep a little bit better if I knew that Israel couldn't just attack me in the middle of the night without having to be worried about an existential deterrent. Um, you also see like kind of an increase in Islamophobia at times like this, which again like um, that's not to say the Iranian regime is good or doesn't have problems, but it is really funny to see like somebody like Netanyahu try to appeal to the people, the proletariat of Iran, throw off your oppressive leader. Netanyahu, if there's anybody they hate more than our oppressive leader, it's you. And like the IDF. So if anything, you've brought those people into unity with a leader they may have otherwise disliked. That's actually a similar dynamic. That Hamas was not very popular on October 7th, but they've actually gotten a spike in popularity because of all of the oppression that the Israeli government has been doing on the Gaza Strip. So again, you think these people who kind of champ themselves as like tacticians, tactical geniuses could have, put it into this particular perspective. And also, some missiles have landed in Tel Aviv, which is kind of unprecedented. It does expose the weaknesses of the so-called Iron Dome system. And this famous tweet it's been made famous on the weekend after Tel Aviv was struck was some Israeli on Twitter basically saying like, "Oh my God, they're going to try to turn us into Gaza." It's oh no, really, wow. Which again, it's never war is not good for anybody, and I'm not trying to like kind of poke fun at the situation, but I am saying there is some pretty blatant hypocrisy at play on especially Israel's side for again now they're going out in the international community talking about how horrifying it is that Israeli civilians are being killed in these war operations. It's like, oh really? You didn't just spend the last like 2 years pulverizing a civilian population? Hmm. Um, there's also something they found out ironically. Apparently, the Israelis have a tactical center, wait for it, underneath a hospital in Tel Aviv. Do as I say, not as I do. Because again, they are always talking about how Hamas is hiding under these schools and hospitals. That's why we have to bomb them off the face of the earth. As I mentioned earlier, Israel has also been targeting Iranian journalists. I'm going to read this article from Truthout. Israel bombs Iranian state TV, devastating building during live broadcast. This is written by Sharon Zhang from Truthout, published on June 16th. Israel bombed the Iranian state TV building in Tehran during a live broadcast on Monday, seemingly devastating the building as Israeli military officials falsely touted attacks on military targets. A recording of the live broadcast shows the broadcaster, Sahir Amani, talking when suddenly there's an extremely loud, sustained explosion. The background goes dark as the broadcaster quickly exits the frame, and there's a large cloud of dust and debris falling on the set. The broadcast then went dark but resumed a few minutes later. It's unclear how many workers inside were killed or injured. Initial reports from Iranian journalists say numerous people were killed, as many journalists had stayed inside the building to continue reporting on the war after Israel had ordered the building and other parts of Tehran to be evacuated. Videos of the broadcaster's multi story complex show the building ablaze with a massive fire. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz confirmed that Israel bombed the broadcaster in a post on social media. Ahead of the strike, the Israeli military had said that it was targeting military targets in Tehran, while Katz had touted that Israel was attacking the Iranian propaganda and incitement mouthpiece. International law bars militaries from targeting journalists in war. Even so, Israel has attacked journalists relentlessly for decades and has made Gaza the most dangerous place on earth for journalists, killing over 230 in Gaza over the course of its current genocide. The attack undercuts Israel's claims that their primary goal in the war is to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Other statements, like Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's open threats to assassinate Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, also demonstrates Israel's wider goals of devastation. On Monday morning, Katz had issued a direct threat to civilians in Iran, saying the residents of Tehran will pay the price and soon. After backlash, Katz hastily walked back the statement, saying there is no intention to physically harm the residents of Tehran, even though I literally just said that. Before the military bombed the Iranian state media, while broadcasters were live in the studio. Calling someone a mouthpiece doesn't give you permission to kill them. Fouad Azadi, University of Tehran professor of international relations, told Al Jazeera. Azadi said the building is huge, with hundreds of people working on each of the building's 4 floors. Ahead of the bombing, Iranian health officials reported that at least 224 people had been killed and over 1,200 injured by Israeli strikes in Iran since Friday. Netanyahu's office said that 24 people had been killed in Israel. Whether it is bombing refugees in tents, journalists on the ground in Gaza, state media in Iran, or apartment buildings in Tehran, the Israeli government is completely out of control and unleashing chaos, death, and destruction in its wake. Eitan Mubarak, organizing manager for the National Iranian American Council, said in a statement to Truthout. The U.S. should want no part of this war of aggression. It needs to push to end it before it gets drawn in. Trump can spare innocent Israeli and Iranian lives in this war, but he must do it before it is too late. Israel's claimed to be the only striking military and nuclear targets, but its evacuation orders have targeted numerous civilian areas of Tehran. In response, the Iranian military issued a warning for Israeli residents of Tel Aviv to evacuate. Earlier that day, Israel's defense minister had threatened civilians, saying residents of Tehran will pay the price, and soon. Social media videos over the weekend have shown numerous Iranian missiles finding their targets on the ground in Israel, evading Israel's defense system like the Iron Dome and David's Sling, as well as the U.S.'s Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System that was installed in Israel last year. That article was from Sharon Zhang on Truthout. It was published on June 16th. Israel bombs Iranian state TV, devastating building during live broadcast. All right, I think we're going to close out the show. Stay tuned till 2 o'clock. I'll be changing hats a little bit and doing my electro-pop show, electro-pop therapy. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Again, you can find our materials online. That's Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find on most podcasting apps. I want to thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.